Welcome back. We're talking about the arrest of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. To continue our discussion, we welcome here in our studio Jefferson Morley. He's a former reporter at the Washington Post and the author of 3 books on the CIA. Also with us, Lester Munson is a principal at BGR Group, a leading government relations firm here in Washington, D.C. And joining us from Atlanta, Michael Daugherty is the CEO of the Cyber Education Foundation and author of The Devil Inside the Beltway, a book about U.S. government surveillance and overreach. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Jeff, let's start here in the studio. Of course, the arrest of Assange, his extraction from the Ecuadorian embassy making big news, but there also is a big debate going on about media freedom and the role of journalists and who's a journalist, who's not a journalist. This is what one of Assange's lawyers said after he was arrested. Let's watch this.
We've today received a warrant and a provisional extradition request from the United States alleging that he has conspired with Chelsea Manning in relation to the materials that were published by WikiLeaks in 2010. This sets a dangerous precedent for all media organisations and journalists in Europe and elsewhere around the world.
You're a journalist. Is this a bad precedent?
I think it is. Recognize that the charges against Assange are very narrow. This is computer intrusion is the charge, not espionage, not handing over classified information. In addition, the Obama Justice Department reviewed this same set of evidence and decided not to bring charges on the grounds that it would be a threat to freedom of the press. So we have a new administration, decided to bring the case. To me, it seems like it's a very weak case, and it's designed to send a message to whistleblowers more than it's designed to correct any real serious criminal violation.
Right, Jeff, is there anything that's materially changed since the Obama administration said, we don't want to go ahead with any kind of prosecution?
No, they are reviewing the exact same set of evidence. They've been trying to get more testimony out of Chelsea Manning. Right. She had given a lot of testimony about her relationship with Assange, and she has refused to testify more. They do not have new evidence. They are looking at the same evidence that the Obama Justice Department looked at.
All right, let me bring in Michael from Atlanta. And Michael, as Jeff just pointed out, the charge that Assange could be facing in the United States, if and when he's extradited here, is a very narrow one. It's conspiring to commit, well, it's hacking, basically, computer hacking. Right. And as Jeff points out, it's a very weak charge. Why bring a very weak charge against him?
Well, this is persecution through process, and this started years ago. We're just in another inning of a big, massive standoff, and they are furious, and they don't like having their unlimited power, unchecked power challenged, and they want to get this guy. And everyone should consider the big picture here, whether you think Julian is guilty or not. Don't get sucked down that road. This is about the First Amendment. This is about investigative journalism. This is about persecution through process and the game they play, because they'll pull you in on anything. And if you sit out there like a little minion and go, oh, he did terrible things. So I guess this overreach and punishing gamesmanship by the U.S. government's okay. Wrong. It could be you one day. And this type of thing chills aggressive investigative reporting, and we certainly have a shortage of that in this country anyway. So I don't like what happened today at all.
Lester, some will say Julian Assange broke the law. Others will say that he and WikiLeaks were just doing their job as journalists, shining a light in dark places, places the powerful would not like a light to be shone. To which you would say what?
Well, I'm probably going to disagree with my panelists here. I don't think this is a freedom of press issue. I think there's very good evidence that Julian Assange aided people committing crimes against the U.S. government. Chelsea Manning in particular violated all kinds of rules and laws regarding classified information. That's not a good thing to do in the United States. If Julian Assange is in fact guilty of helping Chelsea Manning do those things or of other things, he should be punished for that. I really don't see this as a freedom of the press issue at all.
But what about what we came to learn, Lester, about what was in these documents? I mean, wasn't that in the public interest? Shouldn't we know what the government was trying to hide from us?
The U.S. government is a democracy, right. Is a representative democracy. There are checks and balances. The Congress oversees what the executive branch does. There are processes to handle classified information and issues in that zone. I used to have a clearance. I took it very seriously. I was not allowed to talk about the things that I saw outside certain places or with certain people. It's something that has to be done if you want to have a security apparatus in this country. It's a democracy. You can argue about the size of that security apparatus and the appropriateness of it. There are ways to handle that through official channels, through our democracy, not by deciding you don't like the policy, therefore you're going to violate the law and reveal things to the public.
Jeff, what about that?
It's a fine idea that we could change, that we could change the rules. But if you don't have the information, you don't even know what to change. And I think that Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange, as her publisher, did a great public service. We learned a whole lot about war crimes in Iraq, for example. We learned about how the State Department operates. There was public value in that. Chelsea Manning's been charged. She's paid her debt to society. President Obama gave her clemency. I think really, that's the end of it. And what we're seeing is with this effort to punish Manning for not testifying more and go after Assange, we're seeing a punitive effort. And that's why I think this is retribution and a threat, because this has already been adjudicated and they don't need to go any farther.
Michael, what do you make of Lester's point that there are systems that are already in place, there are checks and balances which are built in, people who have gripes need to use those?
No, that's lipstick on a pig. That is absolutely wrong. We're not a democracy or a republic, and the entire administrative state and the swamp per se started over 100 years ago. And what is being exposed is actually the separation of powers that don't exist, and how the inner system does fail. And Julian Assange is not in the United States, and he's an Australian citizen. So I don't know how far these tentacles of power actually go, but I don't want to throw this 19th century way the government used to work into the 20th and 21st century when it absolutely is not the case. Due process is missing, and otherwise they would have brought these charges long ago. This is clearly persecution through process by unified internal powers that do not like being held accountable. And that does not mean Julian is innocent or not. That's not the topic, really. It's about due process and their power being usurped. And look at anyone that has tried to do that on either side of the political aisle, mostly though on the right. The system goes after them, and they keep digging and digging and digging till they find something. We've now had a decade, and they come up with this late. Now, it's not about go through the system, it'll all be okay. That's preposterous.
Lester, you've been accused of putting lipstick on a pig, but
I'm not a good farmer. I will say that.
You're not a good makeup artist.
Neither am I a good makeup artist.
Okay, but you will acknowledge, though, that there is a role for the media in cases like this.
Oh, absolutely. And the First Amendment and freedom of the press are hugely important in this country. And I think Mr. Binney's interview earlier is a wonderful demonstration of the fact that in America you have almost total freedom of expression, and you can say crazy things like the government is conspiring with Sweden, Ecuador, and Great Britain to manufacture evidence against a guy who has obviously done some things that are very sketchy, and there will be no legal consequences for you. You can say that our government doesn't function the right way and that there's a 19th century approach that we're talking about, and there's a conspiracy of everyone in Washington to unify and carry something out, which, by the way, is virtually impossible today. You can say those things. There's freedom of speech in this country. No one will be punished for that. You will be celebrated for expressing your views, and I think that's wonderful.
But, Lester, there are also alarming things that have come to light because of what WikiLeaks has done. I mean, William Binney there talked about the collateral murder video. U.S. forces killed thousands of civilians, actually, in the Iraq War, 66,000 deaths, many more than admitted. Talked about torture of prisoners, keeping prisoners away from the Red Cross at Guantanamo.
I think a lot of those, and I'm sorry to jump in, but I think a lot of those issues were discussed publicly, even without WikiLeaks. And the U.S. government is not perfect. It should be subject to scrutiny.
Right.
We should have journalism. I don't think that means that individuals who decide they want to break the law should be allowed to expose classified information willy-nilly and not be punished for that. There are, in fact, mechanisms that do work. If you want to blow the whistle, you can go to Congress, you can go to independent parts of your agency, and you can be heard.
You can go to Congress, Jeff. Didn't Edward Snowden tell us that he tried to go to Congress and nobody listened?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the whole invasion of Iraq on a false premise is a sign that the system didn't work, and that was what created Chelsea Manning's, then Brad Manning's, dissatisfaction, and the system was broken, and the fact that we invaded a country, killed hundreds of thousands of people on a false premise is proof that it didn't work, and more drastic measures were necessary. Were some laws technically violated? Maybe. Again, you know, Assange has not been convicted of this. We don't know the evidence for this alleged computer intrusion, but given that the scale of that violation versus the gross violation of human rights on a massive scale, I think the public interest is in favor of more disclosure, not less.
Michael, the charge, as we've been pointing out, is a very narrow charge, and the headline in USA Today says, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange will be punished for embarrassing the DC establishment. I mean, one theory going around is that the reason the charge is so narrow is that the prosecution here, the law enforcement authorities in the United States don't want to start relitigating how embarrassed those people did get when that information came out.
Well, that's a valid point, but I also think the media isn't thrilled that WikiLeaks has really dominated the headlines in very key transitional points in American politics the last 5-6 years. So I'm heartened that that was part of it. But this is really about selective persecution, selective silencing. There's a load of people out there that have violated national security, but if they're in the club, nothing happens. Everyone that was look at everyone that was given immunity by Comey. Oh, would you like to testify? We'll give you immunity first. That type of thing is just crazy. So this is the problem. When these, listen, I come from a law enforcement family, so it pains me to say, when the trust of the law enforcement agencies is lost, this is the type of thing that undermines their power in the long term. And this protection racket that's going on with the selective perception of, oh, we're going to get you because you did something bad, and oh, all these other people are going to ignore, that's the problem.
Right, Michael,
Okay,
who are the other people who are ignored? I mean, you're saying that
well,
Assange
Hillary Clinton. No, I'm talking about this whole national security, not in this case, but Hillary Clinton, all the people that worked around her, her lawyers. I mean, it's you know, to bring them in, they gave them full immunity to talk. It is the whistling past the graveyard of violations against the government. I mean, look, we've seen so much controversy in Congress. Is anyone held accountable that comes up to Congress and just lies to their face? So this is why people look askance at this thing and look at the narrowness of this and go, really? Really? I mean, it's like you have to have justice equally applied or justice falls across the board. And this is a country built on the separation of powers, and suddenly the public's going, wait a minute, the powers aren't so separate. Evidently, if you're in the right club, or you violate the law and you're the right person, or you're in the right bureaucracy of Washington, you can go along and get away with it. But if you're ripping their mask off, they're going to find something you did wrong. And I would highly recommend everyone read 3 felonies a day. It's really hard not to break a law these days. So this coaching, this helping with a password, you know, after this long, this is what you start with. I can't wait. And I hope they don't bring them to a military court, or that's really going to be outrageous. Because this needs to be really public. Because people need to get, everything has to be out.
Lester.
Anand, just to respond to what was just said, I think the proof that that is not really the way things are is what has happened to David Petraeus in this country. Here's a man who was a war hero, who was as decorated as anyone in this town, who served his country in harm's way, in a leadership role, did amazing things for this country, was serving as director of the CIA, and when it was found that he had, in fact, violated the rules over classified information, he is now a convicted felon. He had to leave government service. If he was thinking about running for president, and I think he would have been a terrific candidate for it, he now can no longer do that. There was no one more inside and more part of the US government structure. He made what is, in the grand scheme of things, a relatively minor violation of classified information procedures, and his career was destroyed.
What about that, Michael?
No, Petraeus was not an Obama insider like the rest of them. There's a litany of people that tried to speak up during the Obama administration, and the way they get rid of you is way more than through process internally. They also can ice you out, freeze you out, you know, or what I used to call the Eric Holder School of Law, where, yeah, we're going to do something terrible, and good luck holding us accountable. It'll cost you years and millions.
Right.
Shall we talk about Michael Flynn? It's not the conviction, it's the method. Did we really need to intimidate him and go in the morning? Do we really need to threaten the house, the kid? Do we really need to do all that? Really? Is that what we do with white-collar, nonviolent offenders? I wonder why is that?
All right.
This is the type of stuff that happens that people just shake their head.
I want to get back to the Julian Assange case. And Jeff, this is how the British Prime Minister Theresa May and the British Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt responded to his arrest. Let's watch this.
I am sure that the whole House will welcome the news this morning that the Metropolitan Police have arrested Julian Assange. Arrested for breach of bail after nearly 7 years in the Ecuadorian embassy. He has also been arrested in relation to an extradition request from the United States authorities. This goes to show that in the United Kingdom, no one is above the law.
We're not making any judgment about Julian Assange's innocence or guilt. That is for the courts to decide. But what is not acceptable is for someone to escape facing justice. And he has tried to do that for a very long time. And that's why he's no hero.
Not above the law, no hero. No, it's not automatic that he'll be extradited. He still has legal recourse.
We're up for a long process before that happens. But, you know, this charge, they're still dancing around the fact that this is a pretty minor charge. And when Assange gets back to the United States, he could be charged with much more. There's nothing in the extradition that says that he couldn't be charged with more. So they may have more charges waiting for them, and, you know, those charges could be, you know, very secret, or the evidence for them could be very secret. So it's really opening up a Pandora's box to say this guy, after this long, should be prosecuted for this minor offense. Compared to the value of what he published, I think that they're going after him for a punitive reason.
Michael, Julian Assange can go to a British court and appeal any extradition request from the United States. If this is a weak case, as it's made out to be, that court's going to be looking at what the United States has presented to them. Is it likely then that they will deny the extradition request?
I highly doubt it. Look, you know, Assange is sort of an enemy of all of them. I mean, you know, none of these people like having their diaries opened electronically. And really, who would you rather have mad at you, Julian Assange or the United States government that's a huge partner and ally? So I highly doubt that that's going to happen. And the question is, how much longer are they going to grind it out and grind it out? Again, you know, I'd like people to look at the process of all this. And I love the fact that this is happening on the world stage, because I think it's important for people to get their illusions destroyed about how some of these things work and focus on, right, everyone should be held accountable to the law if we have adequate laws that are clear, that are not used and twisted like taffy, and are transparent and evenly and equally applied.
Right.
There's a lot happening with that that's not going on.
We're going to have to leave it there. Thanks to all of you for being with us.